Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k. We've got a Rate It or Hate It Necrons video for you today. We're going to be discussing the Tomb Blades, we're going to go through the data card, go through some sneaky tactics that I've got for you, and we're going to give it a, I was going to say Planet 40k rating, that was last year, we're not doing that anymore. We are doing the Rate It or Hate It, of course, and you'll see at the end of the video whether I rate or hate them, and we're also going to compare them to some units as well, some alternative options. Now before getting into today's video guys, if you've not checked out our Planet 40k Facebook group page, do so with the link down in the description or maybe in the top right of your screen, there might be a little link. We are putting out sort of behind the scenes images, things I'm getting up to, things I'm purchasing, future battle report, maps and things like that, painting schemes. So get involved if you haven't already and just give me a little hello. Right, let's get into this. The Tomb Blades from the Necrons Codex. So we've got Tomb Blades on a 32mm base. You get 3 models for 75 points or 6 for 150 points. That's the two options in terms of the unit size. They are mounted units that have got fly. I've remembered all the stuff before getting into the major part of the data card for once. Right, statistic wise, we've got a movement of 12 inches. Rapid, absolutely rapid, and they're even quicker than that. We'll get onto it in a moment. Toughness 5, 4+ armor save, 2 wounds, leadership 7 and OC 2. Now that movement stands out like a sore thumb, doesn't it? Movement 12 is very rare in our codex. I think is it just the Acanthrites that can do that? I know things have got movement 10 nowadays, Wraiths and so on are fitting destroyers, but movement 12 is just great, isn't it? Really good for just getting your secondaries done with reliability. Right, let's move into the abilities part of the data card on the right hand side here. They've got Scouts 9 inches. Now Scout 9 inches, it's just an option. I always seem to forget this when I'm in game. I always seem to think I've got to use it, Shall I go forward? I need to go forward. But really you don't have to use it, because sometimes your opponent can use them as a bit of a springboard. If they can take an advantage of somehow getting within engagement range of them because you moved them a little bit too far forward into a threat range, then they can be got at, and then they could be springboard within consolidation moves and just into your back lines. So sometimes you've got to be a little bit careful of your scout move, but sometimes it can be really handy for your secondaries early game. Turn 1, if you pull the card Cleanse, Area Denial, especially if you go first, No Man's Land, Extend Battle Lines, and so on, Scout 9 inches is a fantastic ability. Now the unique ability is Invasion Ingrams. So at the shooting phase, after a unit is shot, they make up a normal move up to 6 inches. Now they won't be able to charge, but this unit does not want to charge. They're a shooter unit that likes to move around. So that's going to pretty much just guarantee you, instead of moving 12 inches, you're moving 18 inches realistically. So everything I said about how amazing 12 inches is, well, 18 inches is just so much more. 18 inches literally can get you wherever you want within a turn. Providing that you've got to shoot, of course. Now there are some war gear abilities and options, so we're going to go through those options before we get onto the weapon side of things. The Nebuloscope, if you select that, has the Ignores Cover ability. So you've got the option of that, or the Shadow Loom. Shadow Loom has the stealth ability. Now don't get me wrong, ignoring cover is nice and there's loads of cover in 10th edition. But stealth I think is just nice as well. -1 to the hit roll I think is good. I suppose it's up to you, but the ranged weapons in my opinion, we're going to go over them in a moment anyway, I think they're a bit lackluster for Tomb Blades. They're not really in my opinion there for damage, they're there for scoring and movement. So I would rather keep them alive than give them a little bit more of a damage output. So stealth is the one I picked there, Shadow Looms, and then you've got the further option of selecting shield veins if you want them or not. If you want them, you get a 3+ armor instead of a 4+, which is nice, but the move characteristic goes to 8 inches rather than 12. That one, I'm still unsure about that one if I'd select it. I think most of the time I don't select it, because if you have an 8-inch movement and you fire, then you move in another 6, that's still 14 inches, that's still a lot. And you've got a better armor save. So in fact, I probably should start selecting that more. But if you don't, you're going to have that 4+ armor save, but you're moving a lot quicker. So that's the actual war gear options. in terms of the abilities, we're going to actually go on to the range and melee attacks now. So let's start this off with there's 3 options here. There's 3 options yet again. You've either got particle beamers, twin ghost blasters, or twin Tesla carbines. I'll go through all 3 of them, then I'm going to explain in the tactics section of this video what I would select and why, because there is a bit of a neat trick you can do with them. Range weapons, particle beamers. They've got blast and devastating wounds, which is nice. 18-inch range, it's the worst range out of the 3. D6 attacks, which is probably the best out of the 3. Hit on 3, strength 5, no AP, 1 damage. That part stinks. No AP, 1 damage. If you're going up against the wrong faction, Space Marines with power armor, it's not really doing a lot against standard intercessors. They've still got a 3+ armor save. They're 2 wounds apiece. You need 2 to go through just to eliminate 1. I mean, blast does help, of course, because there might be a 5-man unit, a 10-man unit, maybe there's a 20-man unit. Then it does help. And dev wounds on top will remove those armor saves. So it's a decent weapon out of the 3. The second one, the twin ghost blasters, lethal hits and twin linked. 24-inch range, 2 shots per model. I don't like the 2 shots per model. I think it used to have rapid fire, didn't it, in the old edition? But rapid fire, it became twin linked, didn't it? So it's twin linked to re-roll any wound rolls. But with only 2 shots per model, it's kind of poo. Again, hitting on 3s, again strength 5. -1 AP is a little bit more helpful, but 1 damage again. I don't like these like lethal hit weapons on the very low strength stuff, like strength 5. It works fine with Necron warriors, with the Ghost Flayers and Ghost Reapers, because they're doing it in mass. There's a volume of attacks there, so you can expect to get some lethal hits. But when you've only got 2 shots per bike, and you've only got 3 in a unit potentially, how many of those are going to be 6s, if any? So I'm not that keen on that one. And the -1 AP, even though it's Ghost, it's helpful, I don't like it. I'm not that keen. Then the third option is the twin Tesla carbine. It's got assault. That is big. That is big because we spoke about the movement already. Potentially you're moving 18 inches with the 12-inch movement and the 6-inch after movement kind of thing. That's 18. You could then advance with this unit as well because they've got assault. So you can get up to another D6 in fact. So what's that? 18 plus that's 24 inches potentially, and still firing as well. That's great. That's really good. Sustain hits 2 on top of that. So you're fishing, you're looking for 6s, and twin linked again, which is nice. 24-inch range is good. 2 shots per model, not so good. Hitting on 3s, strength 5, no AP, 1 damage. That part all stinks. We know that. I mean, I'm not going to talk about my tactics right now, but just from the actual weapon stats alone, I think the particle beamer is the best weapon. But the twin Tesla carbine is definitely up there because of the assault keyword. That is probably key, and you could even argue that the twin Tesla carbine is the best weapon purely for more speed. Right, let's get into my tactics then. What am I doing, how am I doing it, and what are all these sneaky tactics? Let's talk about it. So when you're using Tomb Blades, what I like to do is use the Hypercrypt Legion. Now the Hypercrypt Legion, if you're not aware by now, where have you been? The Hypercrypt Legion allows you to pull off units in your opponent's turn at the end of the turn, and then bring them in your reinforcement step of your turn, and depending on if they've got deep strike and whatnot and how they enter, it all depends I suppose. This unit doesn't have deep strike, so they will go into strategic reserves and use normal strategic reserve rules. Unless, there's a big unless there, unless you're using the Cosmic Precision Stratagem. And that's the big part here, that's the sneaky tactic that I've got for you today. Now Cosmic Precision, it applies to units that have got deep strike or units that have just hyperphased, one or the other. This unit, if you've just hyperphased them, it can apply to them. They don't have deep strike, so that part won't. But as long as they've hyperphased, it's fine. So what you then do, in your opponent's turn you pull them off, in your turn you bring them on, and now they're eligible to be selected. Well, they were eligible because they hyperphased. I'm waffling on a bit, let's get on with it. So you bring them in 3 inches away, just slightly over 3 inches away from enemy units. Now what you need to be doing is making sure that you are within 6 of an objective. Within 6 inches of an objective. Maybe you're looking at your opponent's deployment zone objective. Maybe you're looking at one in the no man's land. but you're 6 inches away maximum. You take your shots, whether it's Tesla, whether it's particle beamer and so on. Take your shots, try to shoot at the unit that's on the objective if you can, because you want to make as much space as you possibly can, just in case they've screened it off really well. And once you've taken your shots, you can do your invasion engrams ability. So you can now move 6 inches, normal move. So now you're just literally just stepping onto the objective. You're stepping on from the hyperphase, you're literally coming in, shooting and stepping on, almost like there was no restriction at all. Now just imagine you had the secondary card capture enemy outpost. You just shot some units, shot some models off the objective, and you've stepped all 3 toes from the Tomb Blades onto the objective with OC2 per model. You've now got 6 OC onto the objective. Maybe that's not enough, don't get me wrong. You need to think about it a little bit more. Maybe you need another deep strike unit in there. But it can be enough. It can be enough. So you can step onto the objective and score it. Again, capture enemy outpost. It could be part of the primary mission rules potentially, and you just take that objective away from them. I mean, another great use of that ability is just ducking outside. You take your shots, duck out of sight behind a ruin so your opponent can't fire at them. I mean, maybe it'll completely obscure them, or maybe it'll just give them a cover save, but a cover save is good anyway because it's like having shield veins, isn't it? It's like having that +1 to the armor save in a way, and because it's reducing AP. So it's a way of having that, but also retaining that 12-inch movement. Now, speaking of war gear, we've got a lot to discuss in terms of the weapons. What I would do and what the advanced play is to have at least 1 Tesla carbine within the unit. Because if you go back to the data card, you can see that any number of models can be equipped with any of the weapons. So you would take 1 Tesla carbine maybe, and I think I would prefer to take the other 2 options as the particle beamers, because I think that's the best weapon, dev wounds. Blast and dev wounds, you've got a few attacks there, D6 attacks per weapon. You could roll low, but you're still... I mean, the other weapons only have 2 shots anyway, so if you roll as low as that, then it just equals it, doesn't it? But you could roll a 6. It's got blast and dev wounds as well, but the reason for taking 1 twin Tesla carbine within the unit is if you advance them. If you've got a secondary objective card that is like deploy teleport homers, for example, and the only way to get there is by advancing, because you're just slightly short in terms of the range of getting to your opponent's deployment zone, you advance them, and in order to do the deploy homers, you need to be eligible to shoot. Now, if you've got an assault weapon in there, just the 1 model, it's assault, you're still eligible to shoot, right? So that 1 single model can be the difference between being able to do that secondary and not doing that secondary. Because if all 3 were particle beamers, or if all 3 were twin Gauss blasters, then if you do advance, you're not eligible anymore. So by having that 1 singular twin Tesla carbine is a huge difference in my opinion. Now, if you're looking for actual damage and you're not looking at secondaries, you're probably looking at the wrong unit. But if you are really looking at damage, I think they're all kind of on par. It all depends on who you're going up against, what faction you're going up against. Are you going up against light infantry? Are you going up against elite infantry? Are you going up against high armor save, so you're looking for dead wounds? Are you going up against high model count? Do you need AP? There's a lot of different scenarios with different factions, so I think all in all they're kind of equal, and I'll just play to your strength, which is just scoring secondaries rather than looking at damage. Let other units like Immortals do the damage, and let the Tomb Blades actually do the scoring. Right, let's compare some units then. The first unit I've got in comparison to the Tomb Blades, this one's a little bit of a left field pick, but you'll see in a moment exactly why I picked this. The Chronomancer. Chronomancer is a Necron's character. Got an itchy nose again. And I think he's 50 points, isn't he? So he can be leading warriors or immortals. Now the reason I've selected the Chronomancer is because he also has the move, shoot, move ability. Very similar to the Tomb Blades with the Chronometron ability. So you can do that same cosmic precision trick if you've got warriors or immortals that were hyper phasing out and hyper phasing back in with that cosmic precision stratagem. They can then shoot and then step onto the objective. There's going to be a lot more damage output from that unit, and there's going to be a lot more OC, because warriors and immortals have 2 OC per model, and you're going to have at least 5 or 10 if it's warriors as a minimum. in terms of model count, that is. In terms of OC, that's 10 or 20 as a minimum. Yeah, Chronomancers you can definitely compare to Tomb Blades, but the only difference here though is the Tomb Blades cost 75 points for 3, whereas a minimum unit of Immortals is 70 points. So it becomes a little bit more expensive, maybe a little bit more reliable. Depends how you look at it. You can also compare Canoptic Wraiths. Now Canoptic Wraiths, they've got the speed, they've got 10 inches of movement, they've got the same OC with OC2, much more durable than the Tomb Blades, potentially with the Feel No Pain with a Technomancer, but that does get more expensive of course, not quite 75 points. They're great for their Canoptic Court power matrix as well, hold on to that Canoptic Court stuff, so it's a comparison for secondaries, but again I think they're slightly different. One wants to get within engagement range and just hold ground, the other one's a bit more movement based, doesn't want to be within engagement range, so there's a comparison there, just not, it doesn't quite go together. Ophidian Destroyers are a bit more of a closer match, although they can fight in engagement range of course. 100 points for 3, so 25 points more. OC2 again. They've got Deep Strike, which Tomb Blades don't, and they can use it in all the turns because they have their Tunneling Horrors ability, which is basically like the Hypercrypt Legion hyperphasing, except if you've not got the Hypercrypt Legion and maybe you're playing the Abasis Phalanx or the Annihilation Legion and so on, they can you've still got a unit that can do that ability, come out in your opponent's turn and pop back in with Deep Strike. I think that's a good unit. They also do move quite quickly, but you don't really need to move them, you just not hypercrypt them, that's the wrong word. You just need to tunnel horror them, whatever that ability is called. So the movement isn't that needed, but if they don't have far to go, you may as well just move them. But I would always pull them off, that's the thing, I'd always pull them off. And they can fight in melee, which is a good point as well. But there's no move, shoot, move ability, of course. In fact, they don't even shoot. So there's a comparison there again. Not quite as good, but the next one we've got is Triumph Praetorians. Triumph Praetorians, we're getting more expensive now, 120 points. They can shoot, they can fight, they've got Deep Strike, they've got the speed with 10 inches of movement, they've got OC2 again, and they of course improve the Abasis Phalanx if you're playing that detachment. So that's a bit of a comparison. And finally, the Canoptic Acanthrites. Only 10 points more for the 3. They're a quick unit. OC2, they've got Infiltrate, which can be useful. They've not got the move, shoot, move thing, but they do have their own melt aversion weapons, and they've got the Void Blaze for engagement range as well. But I think the Tomb Blades are definitely in the mix with all those units. In terms of secondary scoring, they're probably up there as the best unit, I'd say. And in terms of damage, not even close. Not up there at all. They can do a bit, but really, it's not about the damage. It's not about the damage. Let's get on to that rate or hate then. What are we doing with the Tomb Blades? I mean, they're rapid. The damage isn't fantastic, but they're great for scoring objectives, secondary objectives, even some primary objectives. And you know, the mission objectives, sometimes you've got to get onto the no man's land and get an objective to score points, sometimes you've got to capture enemy outpost. Even if you're not playing the Hypercrypt Legion, they are still definitely very good units. One of the most reliable units you've got in the Codex in terms of just getting from A to B without taking 2 or 3 turns to do it and advancing and foregoing shooting and things like that. They just do it fast. And for that reason alone, you've got to rate them. You've got to rate them because they're just quick. They're just so quick. And if your opponent ignores them, they are going to rack up points. And once they do go down, which they eventually will, you've only lost 75 points. You've only lost 75 points. They've probably already scored you a buttload of points on in your victory points. Worth it. Great trade-off and a great unit from me.